In Durban, the Govender brothers are known as prominent businessmen, owners of a successful security company with alleged political ties to the ANC. But behind the polished image, a darker tale was unfolding. Pharrell Govender was reportedly in a relationship with the woman who, unbeknownst to him, or perhaps not, was also involved with another man, Shailen Singh. Tensions quietly escalated. Then came the threats. Shailen began receiving chilling messages, death threats sent straight to his phone, and on the 29th of December 2024, those threats became a reality. In the upscale neighborhood of Umhlanga, Shailen Singh was ambushed and laid down in broad daylight. And the motive? Many believe it was personal. A woman caught between the two men. Jealousy ignited and turned deadly. Now in this episode, we take a look into the case that sent shockwaves through KwaZulu-Natal. This is the murder of Shailen Singh. The Govender brothers are high-profile businessmen with deep roots in KwaZulu-Natal's construction and security industries. Collectively, the brothers employ over 3,000 people across their enterprises. But behind their polished reputation lies a murkier tale. In 2002, the state's Anti-Corruption Special Investigating Unit exposed a staggering 182 million rands in irregularities tied to the procurement of personal protective equipment during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. At the time, the Limpopo Department of Health awarded the 185 million rands PPE contract to the KwaZulu-Natal-based company, despite it not appearing on the official suppliers database. Now that company, Prosecure, was one of 216 hand-picked firms to share in Limpopo's 932 million rands PPE splurge. Most of the beneficiaries were allegedly linked to politically connected individuals, ANC activists, or relatives of high-ranking officials and prominent politicians. Amid the chaos, Pharrell Govender, divorced and a father of three, found himself entangled in a personal drama that added fuel to an already scandalous fire. Pharrell had been dating a young woman from Candlewood. Unbeknownst to him, she was also seeing a 32-year-old Shailen Singh, the owner of Shale Trans, a successful logistics company. Now Shailen was married to Tamika and had a son, was said to have been romantically involved with Pharrell's girlfriend. When Pharrell discovered the affair, things turned dark. Furious and betrayed, he allegedly began harassing Shailen with death threats. Reports suggest that Pharrell may have even physically assaulted his girlfriend in a fit of rage over her possible affair with Shailen. The tension had been simmering for days. One day, Pharrell made a call to Shailen Singh, proposing a face-to-face meeting in Umhlanga, a confrontation that would end in bloodshed. It was just after 12 midday when Shailen, seated in his white Toyota Hilux buggy, parked at 39 Meridian Drive, waited unknowingly for what would be his final moment. Pharrell, anticipating the meeting could turn violent, had called in backup, his brother, Daryl Govender. Now Pharrell arrived in a black BMW X5, while Daryl followed close behind in a Ford Ranger. The plan was set in motion. As Shailen sat in his vehicle, the Govender brothers pulled up. Pharrell approached first, confronting him directly through the car window. Within seconds, the confrontation escalated. Pharrell drew a weapon, and without hesitation, he pulled the trigger 5 times. Shailen was hit in rapid succession, slamming over the wheel, lifeless. The scene was brutal. Shailen was laid down on the spot. Witnesses later reported seeing the brothers calmly walk away from the scene, and CCTV cameras captured their vehicles leaving the area, sealing their involvement in the cold-blooded execution. What followed was almost surreal. Instead of fleeing the province or going underground, the brothers allegedly returned to Pharrell's home, where in a bizarre twist of normalcy, they sat down to eat Nando's for lunch. They hanged out at Pharrell's place until around 7 p.m. Meanwhile, chaos unfolded elsewhere. A call came through to Shailen's father from a private security company. Something had happened. Shailen had been shot. Rushing to Umhlanga, the family arrived only to be confronted with an unthinkable reality: the lifeless body of their son. Police launched an investigation immediately, and it didn't take long to identify the suspects. But when the officers went looking for the suspects, Ferrell and Darryl had vanished without a trace. Then 3 days after the shooting, on the 1st of January 2025, just as the new year dawned, the brothers unexpectedly handed themselves over to the authorities. The courtroom was electric with tension when the Govender brothers finally appeared before the magistrate. Every seat was taken. On one side, the grief-stricken family and the friends of Shailen Singh, and on the other, the loyal supporters of the Govender brothers. Outside, a swelling crowd gathered, many clad in t-shirts boldly declaring the brothers' innocence, and the Singh family with t-shirts of Shailen on them. It was like a standoff between the two clans outside the court. The Govenders applied for bail, but the judge wasn't swayed. The state argued fiercely that the accused posed a serious threat to witnesses. One name in particular loomed large: Ferrell's girlfriend. She was reportedly terrified for her life. Not only was she a potential key witness, but reports also surfaced that Ferrell had assaulted her after learning of her involvement with Shailen. Her fear wasn't unfounded. In their affidavits, the brothers denied any involvement in Shailen's murder. But this was no ordinary case. It was classified as a Schedule 6 offense, the most serious level. It indicates that the state believed that this was a cold and a calculated, premeditated hit. The state, in an explosive 27-page affidavit, laid out why the Govender brothers are suspected of orchestrating the cold-blooded hit of Shailen. Now, the prosecutor told the court that the motive was personal, a deadly fallout over an affair. Singh had allegedly been romantically involved with Ferrell's girlfriend. Now, the prosecutor also revealed that Singh's wife had informed the police that her husband had been receiving death threats from Ferrell prior to the murder. Then came the smoking gun, the CCTV footage, placing both Ferrell and his brother Darryl at the scene in Umhlanga at the exact same time that Singh was laid down.
The Durban Magistrates Court says if released on bail, Ferrell Govender is likely to undermine the proper functioning of the justice system. Magistrate Kevin Broughton said the accused failed to present the existence of exceptional circumstances which could warrant his release. The state's evidence has also been deemed satisfactory that Ferrell would likely intimidate witnesses, including the girlfriend in question. The accused's failure to surrender his firearm has also been considered. According to the state's cell phone records, revealed that Ferrell called the deceased Shailen Singh several times on the day of the incident. The state further revealed that it also has CCTV footage placing the accused at the crime scene. However, in relation to the second accused, Darren Govender's involvement, the court found parts of the state's evidence to be inadmissible. In granting Darren bail, Magistrate Broughton highlighted that he does not pose a flight risk reacting.
According to the state, the footage reportedly shows Ferrell standing at the passenger side of Shailen's vehicle. He fires 2 shots, pauses, and then unloads another 8. In the aftermath, Darryl is seen pulling Ferrell away from the vehicle and escorting him back to the black BMW X5 before fleeing the scene. Darryl Govender was eventually granted bail, set at 200,000 rands after a second attempt. Now, his defense team argued that during the identity parade, the primary eyewitness failed to identify him as being present at the scene. And importantly, he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. More allegations surfaced, claims that Ferrell not only threatened Singh before the murder, but also physically assaulted his girlfriend and threatened to lay her down as well, execution style. With Shailen now dead, the state believes those threats were not idle. They fear that if Ferrell is granted bail, he may carry out the rest of his threats. Adding a layer of complexity, the key witness in the identity parade pointed to someone other than Ferrell as the shooter. This raises questions about the reliability of eyewitnesses' testimony and puts even more pressure on the state to produce the CCTV footage it claims shows Farrell pulling the trigger. For now, the case remains in court, with shocking twists, hidden motives, and a community demanding justice. All eyes are on the trial. This video looks into one of South Africa's most audacious financial crimes, the 178 million rands fraud orchestrated by the Singh siblings against Investec. Now the Singhs worked hand in hand with corrupt government officials in Ghana, securing over R1 billion in state contracts for road construction and hospital projects. But the deals were a fraud. They used the contracts to secure loans with nearly R500 million from Investec, not to build infrastructure, but to fund a life of unimaginable luxury. From rare McLaren supercars to opulent properties in elite suburbs, now the Singh siblings lived like royalty until the lies began to unravel. Now when they defaulted on the loans, red flags were raised. That's when the truth surfaced that the contracts were fraudulent, the guarantees were forged, and the money was long gone. Now the Master of the High Court appointed liquidators to track and recover the stolen assets. But just as they were closing in, after securing several properties linked to the Singh siblings, the unthinkable happened. James Murray and his son Thomas, the court-appointed liquidators, were taken out in a targeted hit on the N1 highway near the new road off-ramp. It's now suspected that the attack may be linked to Rushil Singh himself. Now in this video, we'll look into the events that led to the fraud, from the fraudulent deals in Ghana to the forged bank letters, the stolen millions, the luxury lifestyle, and the cold-blooded murders that stunned the nation. The story begins with BIG, Big Innovations Group, a prominent accounting and auditing firm with a long history of working with various government departments. Behind the polished image of spreadsheets and boardroom meetings, a darker plot was unfolding. Now through BIG, the Singh siblings also owned a Ghana-based company called GIC, Ghana Investments Company. Now at first glance, it looked like a savvy expansion, but beneath the surface, GIC was a gateway to a massive, meticulously orchestrated scheme. The Singh siblings had cultivated close relationships with key Ghanaian politicians, officials who held sway over procurement and contract approvals. Now to grease the wheels, the siblings paid over 90 million rands in bribes in return for government contracts valued at over R1 billion. This was covering road construction, stormwater drainage systems, and even building of hospitals. Now on paper, it looked like nation building, but in reality, it was the perfect cover for a high-stakes con. Now with these contracts in hand, the Singh siblings began leveraging them to secure massive loans. Their first major score was around 350 million rands loan, allegedly to fund the public works they were contracted for. But it didn't stop there. In 2021, driven by greed or deception, they sought another 20 million rands from Investec for GIC. Now to sweeten the deal, Nishani Singh submitted a letter, supposedly from a bank GIC uses in Ghana, Stanbic Bank, claiming it guaranteed the loan. There was a clause in the letter that said the guarantee only kicked in once the funds were actually deposited into GIC's accounts, a clause that made Investec uneasy. Not one to be deterred, Nishani rewrote the letter, omitting the critical clause, and sent the altered version back to Investec. And the truth was, there was never a real guarantee. The letter was forged. Stanbic Bank had nothing to do with it. It was all part of the Singh siblings' carefully crafted illusion. Investec bought into the lie. Now, after getting it right again, their confidence grew. The siblings returned for an even bigger haul, for 150 million rands loan. But this time, they used BIG to front the request. Now, to secure the loan, they falsified financial statements, making it appear as if the firm was thriving, when in fact it was bleeding cash. Now for a while, everything seemed to be going their way, but the lies have a shelf life. So eventually the cracks appeared. Investec discovered the deception. Too late to stop the initial payouts, but just in time to unravel one of the most audacious financial scams they've ever encountered. The Singh siblings launched GIC in Ghana around 2016, laying the groundwork for what would become a bold financial deception. For years, they kept the illusion alive, heavily borrowing from Investec Bank and securing millions under the pretense of legitimate infrastructure work. By 2021, the money was still flowing. But in 2022, in the wake of the COVID-19 lockdowns, the house of cards began to crumble. Now the siblings started defaulting on their loans. When Investec couldn't recover the funds, they turned to what they believed was their safety net, the loan guarantees, supposedly backed by Stanbic Bank in Ghana. But when they contacted Stanbic to collect, they were met with confusion. Stanbic denied any knowledge of such guarantees. That's when the truth hit, that Investec had been scammed. While the financial facade was crumbling, the Singh siblings were living like royalty. Investigators uncovered a trail of luxury and excess. Expensive holidays, designer clothes, jewelry, and multi-million rand mansions in South Africa's most exclusive suburbs. One of their boldest splurges, the total demolition and rebuild of their family home, an over-the-top mansion projected to be worth over 100 million rands upon completion. But the most jaw-dropping expenditure was their car collection. Over 120 million rands was spent on ultra-luxury vehicles. Among them were 3 rare McLarens, each valued at least 25 million rands each, and a Porsche from the Bad Boys movie. I think it's valued at $1.5 million. Now, investigators traced some of the purchases directly to the funds dispersed by Investec. Now, Roshul Singh even flaunted the cars on social media, unknowingly leaving breadcrumbs for authorities. But now, with police closing in, the McLarens and the Porsche have vanished, likely smuggled out of the country. Now, investigators suspect the cars are now hidden somewhere in the US, far from the courtroom drama building back home. The Murray father and son duo had built a reputation that struck fear into the hearts of the rich and corrupt. Appointed by the Master of the High Court, their task was clear: liquidate everything tied to the Singh siblings and recover as much of the stolen money as possible. From the luxury cars to hidden offshore accounts, designer jewelry and multi-million rand properties, nothing was off limits. If it had value, they would find it, seize it, and sell it at an auction. Murray, the father, was a legend in the liquidation circles, a no-nonsense bulldog with a history of dismantling empires of corrupt politicians and shady business moguls. He had no friends in high places, only enemies, powerful and well-connected enemies. Now, because Murray was the man who didn't blink, didn't bend, and never made deals under the table, if you flaunted wealth on Instagram that wasn't yours, he would find it, seize it, and sell it. According to reports, the Murrays were closing in. The noose was tightening around the Singh siblings. Reports suggested that the Murrays were days away from recovering a large portion of the hidden assets, cars, cash, and properties that would blow the case wide open. Then came the day everything changed. That morning, his son Thomas Murray set out to finalize the liquidation of 3 high-value properties linked to the Singhs, 2 in Pretoria and 1 in Melrose Arch. It was meant to be routine. Meet the siblings, inspect the assets, sign off with the auctioneer. But as they pulled away from the final property in Melrose Arch and meshed into the N1 highway, something unthinkable happened. A vehicle pulled up beside them, and in a sudden burst of violence, 18 shots were fired into their car. It was a precision hit. James Murray was struck 6 times, Thomas took the brunt of the attack. He was taken out at the scene. James clung to life but succumbed to his injuries the following day in hospital. The hit sent shockwaves through the legal and financial cycles. This wasn't just an attack, it was a message. Someone wanted the investigation buried. Someone with millions to lose and no intentions of watching their empire fall. As private investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling piece of evidence. CCTV footage from Melrose Arch that could blow the case wide open. The footage shows James Murray driving into the area in his Toyota Prado, trailed closely by a Ford Ranger with no number plates. Suspicious but not unusual, until what happened next. When Murray and his son left Melrose, the same unmarked Ford Ranger followed them. Moments later, their car was shot up. Now, investigators believe the shots that took out the Murrays came directly from that Ford Ranger. Now, the most explosive detail, the driver of the Ranger is clearly visible on the footage and his name is out there. Now, according to reports, the man co-owns a luxury panel beating shop, one that specializes in supercars, and Rushil Singh had reportedly sent one of his regular McLarens to that very shop for repairs following an accident. And yet, despite the damning footage and the clear connection, the driver has never been questioned. Now, behind closed doors, whispers of corruption and collusion are growing louder. It's becoming clear that someone is pulling strings. Law enforcement agencies could be compromised with money changing hands to bury the investigation. Evidence is being suppressed and leads are going cold on purpose. Now, in 2024, Nishani Singh made a rare court appearance, frail and confined to a wheelchair. Her once commanding presence was gone. She was visibly deteriorating, reportedly battling TB, and it was clear her days were numbered. Not long after, she died in custody from complications related to TB. Now only Rushil Singh remains to face the music. With his sister gone, Rushil has taken the stand, but instead of accepting responsibility, he's pointing fingers at the dead. According to him, Nishani was the mastermind, the architect behind the lies, forgeries and fraudulent guarantees that scammed Investec of all that money. He has pleaded not guilty to charges of fraud, forgery, uttering and falsifying financial documents. This video tells the story of one of South Africa's most controversial figures, a man who started as a professional boxer but later became a feared hitman and a leader of elite, Johannesburg's notorious bouncer mafia that was involved in extorting clubs, pushing dope and sorting people out. Mikey Schultz's name was ringing bells in the city's underworld in the early 2000s. He was such a bad that other criminals would use his name to intimidate or even extort other people. But his empire began to crumble when he was charged with the high-profile assassination of mining magnate Brad Keppel. That one hit unraveled a web of crime within Johannesburg's criminal underworld, exposing corrupt political figures with deep ties to organized crime. Now, the fallout was massive, eventually leading to the shocking arrest of the then police commissioner Jackie Sleby in a case that rocked the entire nation. Now, in this video, we take a deep dive into the infamous life of Mikey Schultz, the boxer that turned underworld enforcer and a self-confessed hitman. Mikey was born in Truyville in Johannesburg to Anna and Mikey Sr. Now his father, a skilled mechanic, raised him as the youngest of 3 children. Now his older siblings were Donald and Kathy Schultz. Now boxing ran in the family, Mikey's brother, Donald, was also a professional boxer, but tragedy struck in 1999 when he died of an apparent suicide at the age of 36. Now, another major figure in Mikey's life was Brian Mitchell, a legendary South African boxer who would later become his first professional trainer. Now, despite being 15 years older than Mikey, their bond was like that of brothers. Now, Brian had grown up alongside Mikey and his brother Donald and even married their sister Kathy. Now, a dominant force in South Africa's boxing, Brian held multiple championship titles and was undoubtedly a major influence on both Mikey and his brother's path into the ring. Mikey was a troubled kid, attending GP Boys High but never matriculated. Instead, he went to college and earned a trade qualification, but his true passion was always boxing. He stepped into the ring for the first time at just 12 years old in 1987, competing as an amateur until 1995, when he turned professional under the guidance of his brother-in-law, Brian Mitchell. Now, as a fighter, Mikey was a force to be reckoned with, a relentless machine in the ring, known for his raw talent and tireless work ethic. He carved out a reputation as a dedicated, disciplined boxer. Now, he remained undefeated until his first retirement in 1999, boasting an impressive record of 14 wins with 7 knockouts and only 2 draws. Now, Mikey Schultz wasn't just another boxer. He was a man built for this shit. As Mikey rose through the ranks of the world of boxing, he began attracting the wrong kind of attention, specifically from underworld figures, one of whom later was the notorious Lolly Jackson. But it wasn't just the criminals who fascinated him. Mikey was drawn to the allure of the nightlife, fast money, the dope, and the women. Whether it was lack of self-discipline or the temptation of easy wealth, he eventually walked away from the world of boxing while he was still in his 20s, stepping into a world far darker and more dangerous. Mikey formed the infamous Elite Security Group, a shadowy force that dominated the streets of Johannesburg. More than just a security company, Elite was an alleged ruthlessly violent bouncer mafia, specializing in extortion and the murky business of sorting people out. Now, in their world, sorting out meaning down rival gangs in broad daylight at packed restaurants, or putting competitors to death in an incident that was captured by CCTV cameras. Now, Elite was not to be messed with, and Mikey allegedly became the guy that underworld kingpins could call when a dirty job needed to be done. Reports suggest that Mikey and Elite worked with the infamous biker gang, the Hells Angels. They were mostly pushing dope together at clubs where Elite was doing security. Now, Mikey's name became linked to a web of violent incidents, including hits, arrests, and high-profile investigations. Now, at one point, he was charged with extorting Sandton residents, orchestrating violent attacks, and intimidating male patrons at entertainment venues in Bedford View. Now, his reputation for fearlessness and ruthlessness grew when he was accused of pointing at an employee of Radovan Kretcher in a club in Boksburg. Now, the law began closing in on Mikey and his elite group of enforcers. Now, the Hawks, South Africa's elite crime-fighting unit, launched an investigation into Mikey after he was arrested for assaulting Ashraf Kaji at Taboo in Sandton. But for a man like Mikey, arrests were just another part of the game. Mikey had transformed into a completely different person, no longer just a boxer, but one of the most feared figures in the underworld. Now, his name carried so much weight that other criminals invoked it or even impersonated him to intimidate and extort their victims. Now, his reputation had taken on a life of its own. At one point, Mikey was running security for Lolly Jackson at Teasers, the infamous strip club empire. Not sure if they were extorting Lolly or they were genuine friends, but in an interview, Mikey admitted that he and Lolly had once been good friends, and he had been a regular at Teasers, fully indulging in the wild lifestyle that came with it. Fast money, fast women, an endless flow of booze and dope. He and Lolly would often ride motorcycles together, sharing a bond fueled by excess and adrenaline. By then, Mikey was known to be very much into booze and dope. Now his circle of friends included former soccer star Mark Batchelor, another man whose post-career descent led him deep into the criminal underworld. But one of Mikey's closest friends was Clinton Nassif, a man he considered almost like a brother, especially after the death of his brother Donald. Now Nassif, a powerful underworld figure in his own right, was the head of security for the controversial mining magnate Brett Kebble. As time passed, the fast and dangerous lifestyle fueled by alcohol, dope and violence began to take its toll on Mikey. His personal life unraveled. His marriage crumbled, leading to a bitter divorce from his first wife, with whom he had 2 children. Everything seemed to be spiraling out of control. Then came the moment that would define him forever. At what he described as the lowest point of his life, his close friend Nassif handed him a job, one that would shake South Africa to its core, the hit of Brett Kebble. According to witnesses or the hitman, the murder of Brett Kebble was not a traditional hit, but an assisted suicide, a carefully orchestrated execution allegedly arranged by drug lord Glenn Agliotti and Kebble's business partner. Now the shooters were reportedly assembled by Clinton Nassif, Kebble's own head of security, but the operation was anything but smooth. They botched the job 3 times before finally carrying it out. One time, their gun jammed 2 times in one night, just as they had Kebble in their sights, sitting in his car, waiting for the inevitable. Now another time, their getaway car overheated, forcing them to abandon the job. Now allegedly, Kebble was looking at them on at least one occasion when the gun jammed, expecting it to be over in seconds, but it never happened. Then on the night of September 27, 2005, they finally got it right. Kebble had given his driver the night off and was behind the wheel of his own Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Now the assassins caught up with him on a quiet street in Johannesburg. This time, there was no failures. Mikey was the triggerman. He stepped up and unloaded 6 shots into Kebble, sealing his fate. Brett Kebble wasn't just any businessman. He was a mining billionaire, a man tangled in a web of power, corruption and deception. He had orchestrated one of the largest corporate frauds in South African history, with over 20 billion rands. But beyond financial scandals, he was deeply entrenched in the country's political wars. Kebble was rumored to be aligned with Jacob Zuma, allegedly funneling money into Zuma's camp while he was battling legal troubles. Now this is at the time when the then President Thabo Mbeki was working to crush Zuma's chances of taking power. Now Kebble himself believed he was being targeted by Mbeki's allies, including former National Prosecuting Authority boss Bulelani Ngcuka, using the Scorpion's investigative unit against him. Now, after Brett Kebble's death, the truth unraveled like a crime novel. It was revealed that he had been siphoning money from companies that he was involved in, funneling those stolen funds into a company where he had majority shareholding. Then Kebble sold those stolen monies or stolen shares on the low. And another thing, Kebble had so much debt that no matter how much money he stole, it was still not enough to get him out of the hole. But financial fraud wasn't the only dark secret that surfaced. Testimonies emerged linking Kebble to murder plots. He had allegedly put out hits on multiple people, including Martin Wells, an editor of Newsweek, a publication known for exposing corruption, and they were one of the people who were exposing Kebble's frauds. Another chilling assassination attempt was granted by his head of security, Clinton Nassif. He had paid 2 gunmen to take out Stephen Middlewall, an Allen Gray fund manager, simply because Stephen was blocking a R500 million loan that Keble desperately needed to save his crumbling empire. That was given, but by then, Keble had already lost control of that company. Now Stephen was in the shoulder and his leg, but he survived. But Keble's influence reached even higher. He was reported to be closely connected to Jackie Silebi, the former National Police Commissioner. Now Silebi allegedly was on Keble's payroll, ensuring protection from prosecution for his criminal ways and criminal associates. And Silebi was also feeding them inside information on police operations, allegedly. Now Glenn Agliotti was acting as the middleman in connecting them, and he was paid a staggering $1 million for his role. Now Agliotti introduced Keble to Jackie Silebi so he could maybe help him with his problems, and they were paying Silebi good, but Silebi denied all of that. As for Keble's so-called assisted suicide, it was allegedly staged so that his family could cash in on a massive insurance payout. But his family denied anything of that sort, like assisted suicide. They believed Keble would never take his own life. At the heart of Keble's saga were 5 key players: Jackie Silebi, Glenn Agliotti, and the 3 hitmen who were allegedly recruited by Clinton Nassif. But everything unraveled when Clinton Nassif flipped. Facing charges of insurance fraud, he struck a deal with the prosecutors. He would reveal everything, including details of Keble's murder and Agliotti's corrupt relationship with police chief Jackie Silebi. In exchange, he was granted blanket immunity for his own crimes. Then came the most shocking twist. When Mikey Schultz and his co-accused were arrested, they got offered the same controversial deal: tell all, testify, and walk free. Now the Scorpions, the elite investigative unit probing Keble's murder, were laser focused on taking down the real power players, Agliotti and Silebi. To them, the triggermen were expendable. Now in their pursuit for the kingpins, the Scorpions made a stunning trade-off. They let the killers walk free in the hopes of taking down the masterminds who had pulled the strings from the shadows. In the end, they got away with it. The triggermen were granted immunity. Agliotti, the alleged mastermind, also walked free. There simply wasn't enough evidence to link him directly to the hit. Now the only man who faced real consequences was Jackie Silebi, arrested and convicted for his corrupt ties to the underworld. But for Mikey Schultz, the saga had left him in a darker place than ever before. His life spiraled even further into chaos, a mess of violence, excess, and regret. Eventually, though he found his way back, he credited his second wife for pulling him out of that dark place, helping him rebuild from the wreckage. Mikey reconnected with his old boxing associates, including South Africa's most successful boxing trainer, Nick Durant. Determined to reclaim his former glory, he staged a comeback. At first, it seemed promising. He won several fights, but then came Tinei Morizo, a Zimbabwean powerhouse, in a WBO championship match. Mikey was knocked out cold. Now, refusing to back down, he demanded a rematch. Same result, got knocked out. Now Morizo was simply too strong, too sharp for Mikey. Some believed Mikey had rushed back into the ring too soon, still reeling from the stress and scrutiny of the Keble trial. Mikey has been out of the spotlight for some time now. whether he's truly turned his life around remains unclear. After all, it's been years since his name made headlines for the wrong reasons. But one thing is certain, his life story is one of the most gripping tales to come out of Johannesburg's underworld. A man who rose as a promising South African boxing champion only to become a self-confessed headman. A life that spiraled from the bright lights of the ring into the shadows of organized crime. This video dives deep into the shadowy world of the Nigerian mafia in South Africa, how they first emerged as nightclub security enforcers in Johannesburg before leveling up into a powerful dope-pushing syndicate. We trace their evolution from the streets to the digital underworld, where ruthless groups like Black X now operate in Cape Town, scamming pensioners across the globe through elaborate romance scams. Now this episode pulls back the curtain on the rise, reach, and ruthless tactics of the Nigerian mafia in South Africa. Since the 1980s, Nigerian organized crime groups have been spreading around the world. They first gained a strong presence in Italy, and by the 1990s, they began to take root in parts of South Africa. There are a few reasons why they moved: corruption and poverty in Nigeria, lack of job opportunities, and the need to escape law enforcement crackdowns at home. Many skilled Nigerians left their country in search of better lives, and along with them came some individuals involved in organized crime. Nigeria's oil boom in the 1950s brought wealth, but also corruption. Then in the 1980s, the country faced bad economic downturn. Corruption got worse, and these combined issues pushed more Nigerians to move abroad. Some of the criminals who left Nigeria found it easy to settle in South Africa, especially after the end of apartheid in 1994. Now, Nigeria had helped South Africa in its liberation struggle, so South Africa was more welcoming to Nigerian immigrants during its transition to democracy. At the same time, South Africa had its own crime networks, especially in Johannesburg. One such group was known as the Bouncer Mafia, a group of nightclub bouncers, mostly former white working class men from the apartheid era with boxing and military backgrounds. These bouncers started as simple security staff, but over time they began extorting club owners and taking over parts of the dope trade. In the early days, recruitment of being a bouncer was often a matter of who you knew, but a solid knowledge of boxing was a non-negotiable. Organized companies were virtually non-existent until the late 1980s, when the increase of club numbers forced bouncers to band together. Small crews of 5 or 10 men emerged, ready to back each other up when situations spiraled out of control.
We were very strong. I'd say we were the strongest crew this Johannesburg's ever seen. And we just basically took most of it over by force.
We were always at the clubs, so it made sense to work and get paid for it and then have the drawl at the same time.
Everything was there, the tons were there, the money was there, the woman was there, everything was there.
We weren't an organization or we weren't part of a bouncing group at that stage. We were just good, loyal friends to each other.
We called it elite security. We supplied nightclubs with bouncers and with doormen. Eventually we had over 100 people working for us. We ran the whole of the northern suburbs. Let's just say Diplomat had bouncers at a club. What we do is we just send our guys there. Our guys would go there and go and make trouble and that, and we just had to explain to the owners, listen, the guys that you got working here aren't the right guys for the job. Best you employ us and the trouble will stop.
By the early 2000s, the notorious elite was at the top of the protection bouncer rackets. However, as time marched on, their influence began to slow down. The once formidable power structure started to crumble when the predominantly white bouncer bosses began reaping lucrative rewards from protection fees and dope ties, and as well as rampant dope and alcohol use compromised discipline, while some of the bouncers, hardened by their army backgrounds, became aggressive. Essentially, the bouncer mafia that once ruled the night began slacking and dropping the ball. In a dramatic shift, Elite eventually pivoted its recruitment strategy, increasingly hiring black bouncers. This marked a departure from their original pool drawn solely from poor, working-class white communities. Migrants from Nigeria, the DRC, Mozambique, Namibia, and other nations gradually became the backbone of the new era in nightlife enforcement. Now, by the late 2000s, clubs themselves began hiring more black bouncers, especially immigrants from Nigeria, DRC, and other nations. These newcomers were called Nigerians, even if they weren't all from Nigeria. They were often hired because they worked for lower pay and were seen as less violent, but were more physically intimidating. Now, this helped them blend into the nightlife security scene without any problems. Some of these Nigerian bouncers helped open the doors for Nigerian dope dealers to enter the clubs, especially in Hillbrow, a fast-changing part of Johannesburg. However, Nigerian groups did not completely take over the dope trade in the same way the original bouncer mafia had. The dope market itself was changing, and dominance of the old mafia began to fade as social and racial changes shifted the structure of crime and policing in South Africa. In Cape Town, Nigerian syndicates took a different route. Instead of entering the gang-controlled Cape Flats, they started in the wealthy and safer area of Sea Point, where they got involved in dope dealing and sex trafficking. But they were eventually pushed out of Sea Point by law enforcement and neighborhood watch groups, and they moved their operations to the northern suburbs of the city, to places like Milnerton and Brooklyn at first. One of the most well-known Nigerian crime groups to emerge is Black X, which originally started as a student group in Nigeria in the 1970s. It later turned into a global criminal network. In recent years, South African police, along with US authorities, arrested several leaders of the Black X group in Cape Town. They were accused of running online scams, especially romance scams, where they tricked elderly people around the world into sending them money. They also carried out business scams, stealing millions of rands from companies. Today, Black X members are known to operate mostly from Tableview, a suburb on Cape Town's west coast. They pose as wealthy retirees or lovers online, using fake identities to scam victims out of their savings and pensions. This shows how Nigerian organized crime in South Africa has become more sophisticated and global over time, shifting from dope trade and security work into high-tech fraud.
I've spoken to some private investigators today. They were telling me that it's not unusual and that they deal with these cases almost on a daily basis. But what they're saying is, Shahan, and just to give you some context, is that often widows and people, women who have been newly divorced, they are then, scammed by these people because they go onto these dating websites because often it's older women, they're too shy to go out and date socially and openly. So they go onto social media, onto these dating websites. They meet these men on these websites, and these guys then promise them the world. And then what happens is that they get very, very familiar with these women, and they kind of sort out women who have inherited a lot of money, women who have big pensions, and women who have lots of savings. And that's when they then say to the women, you know what, I want to come to South Africa to come and be with you, to come and spend the rest of my life with you, but I actually cannot afford to buy a ticket to come to South Africa or even to the US or wherever they are. The women then say, okay, fine, I will send you money. And then they'll say, oh, but I need to pay for a visa. The women will then send them more money. But at the same time, Shahan, what they do is they then compromise these women's emails and also their bank accounts. And they siphon off not just hundreds of rands, but millions of US dollars. Now, in this particular case, we're only dealing with alleged crimes having been committed in the United States of America. And that is why the FBI got involved and sought the help of their South African counterparts. And the 8 men were arrested in a place here in Cape Town called Parklands in the Tableview area, where I've been told that it was a multidisciplinary operation, including the Hawks, the local Metro Police, the K9 unit, as well as crime intelligence.
For the most part, Nigerians are middlemen when it comes to the dope trade. They move it, but get it from either South American cartels or in the Middle East places like Afghanistan. Nigerian syndicates in South Africa operate through vast multi-layered dope supply chains, regional and international networks that shift depending on the dope in play. Now, coke is one of their flagship products, trafficked heavily in major cities like Johannesburg, Durban and Cape Town. And where does this dope come from? The cartel heartlands of South America, Brazil, Colombia or Peru. Working hand in glove with powerful South American cartels, Nigerian traffickers orchestrate a transcontinental operation. West African coastal nations, Nigeria, Ghana and Guinea-Bissau, serves as key transit hubs, staging grounds where the cocaine is repackaged and rerouted south. From there, the dope slips into South Africa through multiple channels. International flights carried by human mules, shipping containers hidden in plain sight, and false compartments buried deep in cargo and luggage. Though coke is their stronghold, Nigerian syndicates also trade in H, though with less dominance. Now in this arena, they play second fiddle to entrenched local and East African networks. You see, H travels a different path altogether, flowing from the poppy fields of Afghanistan along the southern routes. Now it flows from Afghanistan to Pakistan or Iran, then East Africa to places like Kenya, Tanzania and Mozambique, before finally crossing into South Africa. Mozambique is a key entry point where shipments are quietly offloaded and funneled down to South Africa by road. Now, Nigerian groups often purchase the H in bulk from East African suppliers. Then in the city, they cut it, mix and distribute it, sometimes blend it with other narcotics to stretch the product and boost their profits. But it must be said, only a small fraction of Nigerians are involved in criminal activities. But as it's often the case, the actions of a few cast a long dark shadow over the entire community. And in South Africa, that shadow has fed tensions, mistrust, and resentment. In a diplomatic move, South Africa recently announced that Nigerians can now enter the country visa-free, an effort to strengthen ties, boost trade, and promote cross-border business. But not everyone welcomed the news. For many South Africans, it felt like an open door for trouble. Critics feared that it would give Nigerian syndicates already operating in the country even more freedom to move, expand, and disappear into the crowd. Mozambique is a nation forged in fire, its soil soaked with the echoes of war. Since winning independence from Portugal in 1975, the country has struggled to lay down its arms. Peace has been promised time and time again, but their guns have never truly rested. After their liberation, rose a rebellion, Renamo, backed first by Rhodesia's Secret Service and later by apartheid South Africa. Renamo launched a brutal insurgency against the ruling Frelimo government. The civil war raged for nearly 2 decades until a fragile peace was signed in 1992. Then 2 years later, Mozambique held its first democratic elections. Frelimo claimed victory in every election thereafter. But over time, Frelimo began to rot from within. Corruption spread, power grew distant from the people, and the promises of the revolution faded, replaced by elite privilege and broken infrastructure. Then came a discovery that should have changed everything: massive natural gas reserves in the north. Instead of prosperity, it brought chaos. Armed jihadist groups swept into Cabo Delgado, feeding off poverty, neglect, and exclusion. What should have been a blessing became another curse. Then in 2024, a nation reached a boiling point. Venancio Mondlane, a charismatic opposition leader beloved by the youth and disenfranchised, emerged as the people's choice. But when Frelimo was once again declared the winner, allegations of election fraud ignited a firestorm. Protest turned violent. The streets of Maputo and beyond erupted with anger. Then came Christmas Day of 2024. There was a prison break unlike any other. Amid the chaos, 6,000 bandits escaped from Maputo Central Prison. Some fled across the borders into South Africa. Now the nation was engulfed in smoke, fury, and fear. Now in this episode, we look into the story of Mozambique, a country caught up in the cycle of war, betrayal, and resistance, a land where peace is promised but never delivered. In 1964, the winds of revolution had begun to howl through Mozambique. The Portuguese had ruled the country for centuries, but the days of the empire were numbered. Rising from the shadows of oppression, the Mozambique Liberation Front, known as Frelimo, they ignited a fierce guerrilla warfare. Their goal was to drive out the colonizers and reclaim their homeland. For a decade, Frelimo waged a relentless armed struggle against Portugal's once mighty yet increasingly strained colonial regime. Now thousands of fighters took to the bush, striking at Portugal's outposts, sabotaging infrastructure, and winning the hearts of rural communities. Meanwhile, Portugal's own foundation began to crumble, engaged in brutal colonial wars, not only in Mozambique, but across Angola and Guinea-Bissau. Portugal's economy was crumbling and its army was getting weaker and weaker every day. The spark that changed everything was the Carnation Revolution. In April of 1974, disillusioned soldiers in Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, toppled the dictatorship in a bloodless coup, demanding an end to the colonial wars. With the old guard swept aside, the new Portuguese government turned to negotiations with Mozambique. Then in September of the same year, the Lusaka Accord was signed. Portugal agreed to transfer power to Frelimo. No voting, just transferring of power. On the 25th of June 1975, Mozambique awoke a new dawn. The Portuguese flag was lowered, and in its place rose the flag of an independent nation. Frelimo, once a band of insurgents, now stood as the ruling party of a liberated state. But independence was just the beginning. Frelimo swiftly set about reshaping Mozambique into a one-party, Marxist and Leninist state. Inspired by revolutionary ideals and supported by the Soviet bloc, they embarked on a radical transformation. The new government nationalized industries, land, and public services. Private enterprise was swept away in favor of socialist control. Now the Portuguese, who had once dominated every sector, they fled, leaving behind ghost towns, abandoned farms, and a shattered economy. Yet amidst the chaos, there was hope. Massive campaigns to improve education and healthcare spread across the country, bringing literacy to thousands and medicine to the forgotten. Schools and clinics emerged where none had existed before. Still, the cost was too high. Opposition voices were silenced in the name of unity and ideological purity. Those who criticized the state were dealt with harshly, and people had fewer rights and freedom. Their guns had barely cooled from the Mozambican War for Independence when a new threat emerged from the shadows. It was in 1976, just 1 year after Frelimo had raised the flag of freedom, and already the seeds of another war were being planted. From the smoke and ruins of a newly born nation rose Renamo. Now this was the Mozambican national resistance. Born not from the people, but from foreign countries secretly trying to control or influence things in Mozambique. Now Renamo was the creation of Rhodesia's secret services, later nurtured and armed by apartheid South Africa. Their mission was to destabilize the Frelimo-led government, crush the Marxist revolution, and halt the rise of socialism in Southern Africa. Now what began as a covert operation quickly grew into one of the continent's most savage civil wars. In 1977, the country was plunged into chaos once again. Renamo launched a ruthless guerrilla warfare, striking at villages, infrastructure, and civilians with no mercy. Now the Frelimo government, itself hardened by the war for independence, they responded with brutal countermeasures. So for 15 years, Mozambique was torn apart by a civil war. It was very bad. By the time the fighting stopped in 1992, the toll was staggering. Millions of people displaced, hundreds of thousands dead, and a nation scarred to its core. From 1992 to around 2010, Mozambique transitioned from civil war to peace through the Rome Agreement, and then after establishing formal multi-party democracy. Now Frelimo dominated for the next 3 decades of elections. Now throughout the 90s and early 2000s, they held relatively peaceful but increasingly unequal and uncompetitive elections. Now the country did experience relative economic growth, but with rising inequality and corruption. Basically, Frelimo started getting fat and corrupt from chowing the country's money, and they forgot about the people and what they stood for. And then on the other side, Renamo, the rebels, they got weaker politically and they became irrelevant to the new generation. Now with all of this happening, it set the stage for future unrest, especially around resource distribution and political exclusion. Now the political piece of this period was kinda real, but increasingly fragile, laying the groundwork for the tensions and upheavals that would follow in the next decades. In the 2010s, the discovery of immense offshore natural gas reserves off the coast of Cabo Delgado should have marked a turning point, a chance for prosperity, renewal, and global investment. Energy giants like Total and Exxon descended with billions in promised wealth. Now Mozambique, it seemed, stood at the threshold of an economic miracle, yet the miracle never reached the people. In Cabo Delgado, one of the nation's poorest and most neglected provinces, hope turned to fury while executives and government officials signed billion-dollar deals in faraway capitals. Now local communities remained stuck in poverty. Land was seized, promises were broken. The youth left jobless and voiceless. They watched as the riches beneath their feet were whisked away by outsiders and elites. Now anger increased, grievances turned into desperation. Then came something darker. Jihadist groups seized the moment and they capitalized on the chaos and disillusionment. They began to infiltrate the region. What started as a local frustration ignited into a violent insurgency. Towns were attacked, civilians were slaughtered, and the government reeled as Cabo Delgado descended into a new kind of war, one fueled not only by ideology and greed, but by rage, betrayal, and the ghosts of a history that refused to stay buried. Now Mozambique once again found itself at the crossroads, torn between the promise of riches and the peril of a rebellion. Amid this chaos, another kind of battle was brewing. This one in the political heart of Mozambique. Then enter Venancio Mondlane, a prominent Mozambican opposition politician known for his bold and charismatic stance against the long-ruling Frelimo party. He rose to political prominence by breaking away from Frelimo itself and aligning with opposition forces including Renamo, the rebels, and then later the Podemos. Mondlane built his reputation through a mix of academic background, legal expertise, and street-level activism. He became especially popular among urban youth and disillusioned citizens by speaking out against government corruption, electoral fraud, and the dictatorship that's going on there. Now, his fiery speeches, strong social media presence, and direct connection with everyday Mozambicans turned him into a leading voice for political change. On the opposite side stood Chapo, a Frelimo loyalist and a steady bureaucrat. But while Chapo embodied the machinery of the ruling party, he failed to ignite the public. Among the youth, he was viewed as the face of everything they wanted to dismantle: inequality, repression, and a generation of stagnation. Mozambique went to the polls to vote in the national elections. Now, these were especially significant because many believed these elections were going to end decades-long rule by Frelimo, especially among the frustrated youth and urban middle class who felt increasingly abandoned by the political elite. As the results trickled in, parallel vote counts conducted by civil society observers and opposition parties, especially Renamo and the Podemos, indicated clear victories for the opposition in key cities. Now, crowds celebrated in Maputo and Quelimane, expecting change to finally arrive, but then came the official results. The National Electoral Commission and the Constitutional Council declared Frelimo the winner in nearly every major municipality, including cities where independent tallies showed them clearly losing. Now, in Quelimane, for example, Renamo's charismatic mayor, Manuel de Araujo, had apparently won by a wide margin, but the official count overturned it. When the Constitutional Court upheld Frelimo's victory in December of 2024, ignoring evidence and appeals from opposition parties, public patience snapped. Young Mozambicans, especially those in urban centers, felt their votes had been stolen again. They took to the streets. Elvino Diaz, a distinguished lawyer and chief legal advisor to opposition leader Venancio Mondlane, and Paulo Guambe, the spokesperson for the Podemos party. The two were traveling through Maputo when their vehicle was ambushed by unidentified assailants. Witnesses reported that the attackers blocked their car's path, approached from both sides, and unleashed a hail of bullets, resulting in immediate deaths of both men. At the time, Diaz was meticulously preparing to challenge the election results. Now, his assassination not only silenced a pivotal legal strategist, but also sent shockwaves through the opposition, intensifying suspicions of politically motivated violence. Protests erupted almost immediately. In Maputo and Nampula, thousands took to the streets. What began as peaceful demonstrations, marches demanding transparency and democratic reform, quickly escalated into clashes with police. As demonstrators gathered near the prison perimeters, shouting slogans, clashing with police, and throwing projectiles, security forces were pulled outwards. The facility's guards were overwhelmed, stretched thin, and partially diverted to deal with the surrounding unrest. Now, inside the prison, tensions had been boiling for weeks. News of fraudulent elections, death of protesters, and state violence had spread even among inmates. Now, using improvised weapons and smuggled tools, a coordinated faction of the prisoners launched a violent rebellion. Some inmates managed to ambush and overpower prison guards, seizing firearms and keys. Now, in the chaos, one section of the prison wall reportedly already weakened by poor maintenance. That wall was brought down by the prisoners. Now, what began as a mutiny turned into a full-scale breakout. An estimated 6,000 prisoners flooded out, overwhelming any remaining guards. Shots were fired, alarms blared, 33 prisoners were killed, and at least 15 more were injured in clashes with security forces during the escape. Now, the weak security of the Mozambique-South Africa border has raised alarms about the potential influx of escaped prisoners into South Africa. Now, criminologists and security analysts have expressed concerns that these individuals, some convicted of serious offenses, might have integrated into existing criminal networks within South Africa.